Today's conversation is with Gordon Lambert. Gordon spent many years in, I believe it was TransAlta, kind of in the oil and gas sector. I met Gordon decades ago when he was in that sector, and he was always concerned and worried about sustainability and environmental issues. He was also one of my advisors on audit I did when I was commissioner. I think you're going to really enjoy the conversation with Gordon.
Welcome to the podcast. Today we're with Mr. Gordon Lambert, who has a long career in the energy sector, notably with Suncor, focusing on sustainability and business. Since his retirement from Suncor, he's worked as the former interim president and CEO of the Alberta Energy Regulator, as well as participating as a member of multiple organizations. So Gordon, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So I guess we can just kind of jump right in. The first one I have for you is I was able to find kind of a lot of good articles about you and your career online. I understand that you've had a career in energy for over 40 years now, and I was hoping you'd be able to tell us a little bit about why and how you got into the sector and kind of how it translates into what you've done to this day.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's always good to reflect back, and it is quite a long time ago now. I mentioned 1980 was when I graduated from the University of Guelph in marine biology, and I had been accepted to Dalhousie to do my master's, and I got a job offer. I mean, it was just how networking works, but there was a company, Imperial Oil, who's still around now, long-standing one, who were setting up an environment group and a team of people. And it was back at a point in time when that was quite pioneering. And so a fork in the road, let's call it, where I could have gone the academic route and carried on that way. But I knew somewhat that would lead to government as an employer. You know, the more specialized I got, that was probably where I was going to end up. And I had worked with Fisheries and Oceans and with the Ministry of Environment in Ontario, and I didn't really want to work for government, to be honest. So the private sector job came along, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to dive in here and give it a go. So Imperial sent me to Cold Lake, Alberta, way up in northeast Alberta, and it was a project there that was very early stage. It was what we call greenfields. There was a couple of construction trailers and some test wells and things, and they were doing the permitting and environmental impact assessment work at that point. So I did get to use my environment background to help guide the project through the regulatory process. I was with a lot of folks doing field work and otherwise, but yeah, that's where I started out. And, you know, I had colleagues there that were not very green at that point in time.
Right.
I had my first boss tell me, we're glad you're here in Cold Lake, Gord, but just to know, I don't need you and I don't want you, but I'm told I have to have you. Yeah, that's not good supervision 101, but it's that started my private sector career and my history in the energy sector.
Right. So then your main kind of time was at Suncor, right? You were there for 17 years?
Yeah, 15 years with Imperial Oil, and I did a 3-year stretch with TransAlta Corporation, a utility company, and then Suncor for the last 18.
Could you kind of go into a bit more detail about what you did in that position?
In the Suncor
Yeah.
role? Yeah, initially I was brought in by the CEO and the executive team to help them in two areas. One was in environment, health, and safety, which is a kind of foundational element of managing risk within the oil and gas industry. It's a quite risky business and big regulatory complexity. So environment, health, and safety was a functional part of my responsibility. And then figuring out this whole realm of sustainability in business, they were on a strategy level, really trying to adopt sustainable development as part of the strategy of the firm. And it was, Gord, help us figure out what that means. And, you know, so that was a pretty big hunting license for me. But the company was going through rapid growth. So it was also a context of a company that was growing rapidly, needed to get foundational aspects of environment, health, and safety right, and then also think strategically about how it positions itself using sustainable development.
And then kind of after that, so you were there for 17 years, then you had the opportunity to work at the Alberta Energy Regulator. Is that correct?
Yes, well, yeah, I retired in 2015, and my phone rang. And well, before the AER, actually, there was a role that I accepted post retirement, which was to serve on a panel that our Premier of Alberta, Rachel Notley, had set up to help develop the strategy for Alberta on climate. So it
Right.
was called the Climate Leadership Panel, and I was one of 5 people. It was chaired by Andrew Leach, who's at the University of Alberta. He's an economist and lawyer now. So it was a really intense effort prior to the Paris conference on climate. We were trying to reposition the whole province at that point on the climate issue, and very, very contentious. So when I took that on, I knew I was holding up the lightning rod, and I knew it was going to be hard. It was following that assignment that the premier and the cabinet appointed me to the board of the Alberta Energy Regulator. The cabinet came to me and said, "Gord, would you step in to serve as the interim CEO and president?" Which I did. I had
Right.
to clean up a few problems there.
Would you say that's kind of like your career highlight in a sense?
Well, yeah, if you had asked me back in 1980 when I was sent to Cold Lake, Alberta to be a field environmental specialist, whether I would be actually the CEO of the regulator I was dealing with at the time,
Right.
I would have said that was very improbable. Like, it's pretty incredible, to be blunt. And
Right.
I think to this day, I'm the only biologist that's ever headed the AER. And so that was also a bit of a forerunner as well. But you know what it also spoke to or reflected somewhat was that in my career, I had always worked with a broad range of stakeholders, environmental organizations, social organizations, business more broadly. And so a real big network of relationships that I had built up that
Right.
allows you to fill that role in the AER very well, because I had to know and learn how to listen to others, how to respect a broad range of points of view on things, and how to bring that into decision making, whether it was for Suncor or in this case, whether it was on behalf of the province. The AER is mandated to reflect the public interest in its decisions. You don't learn that overnight. And the phrase of reflecting the public interest is an easy thing to say. It's a damn hard thing to do,
Yeah.
especially in a polarized world. But when I
Absolutely.
got appointed, the support I had from across all segments of Alberta, perspectives on energy and environment and social matters and Indigenous matters was very rewarding. It's a big bulletin board test.
And so now, since the Alberta Energy Regulator, you've been with like Canadian Climate Institute, World Economic Forum. I know that you worked with Western University. Would you say that these roles were kind of difficult to juggle all together at once?
Yeah, I got to be careful
Right.
and not to overcommit, you know. And I also would just reflect that during the COVID period, it was very difficult.
Yeah.
I was doing the engagement as an executive in residence at the Ivy School of Business, and it was really hard to feel connected to it. But
Right.
what I've discovered over time is that I really am conscious of what energizes me, and the climate and energy is a subject and a challenge that's just always captivated my interests over time. So when I was asked to serve on the board of the Canadian Climate Institute, it was quite easy to say yes to that, having served on that panel. But my time on that topic's gone way back to 1990 even. That one has been a terrific opportunity to have a seat at that table, interact with real experts, top top class experts. And so an easy thing to take on. But when I get asked to do new things, I've got to balance how I want to spend my time. I could be fully occupied by other assignments, but my wife would push back a little bit.
Yeah, I can only imagine having to do kind of all those things together, right? You'd have to make sure that you're doing everything to like a good enough standard.
Balance, yeah,
Exactly.
and personal well-being
Yeah.
and yeah, just interacting with my 5 grandkids and that kind of stuff. That's all part of the mix. But you find as life goes on, your balance point's different. So yes, when I was fully occupied in my career, it was a very full engagement,
Right.
deep engagement. You never left work at home. Like
Right.
you kind of experience of it. There's no disengagement. But now at this stage of life, I'm able to make choices, and you kind of earn
Yeah.
the ability to have some choice and just try and be thoughtful about it. But the point I mentioned too about knowing what energizes you, I would really give that as some advice for you young folks as well, because in the world you're going to enter into post Guelph, it's a big playing field out there. Lots of choices come up that are in front of you. Really understand what experiences you've had over time, what types of activities you've done that you really find energize you the most, and then test that against the roles that you imagine playing. Okay. So the more clear you can get internally on what you're energized by, the better choices you're going to make as you go into your career journey.
Absolutely. So yeah, I guess kind of throughout your career, you've been able to be involved in a whole bunch of different projects. Canada's Oil Sands Innovation Alliance, the Oil Sands kind of Leadership Initiative, Alberta Climate Leadership Plan. Would you say that you have kind of a favorite project that you've worked on, or one that you find the most rewarding?
Oh, wow. That's a tough one, right? Because each one of those things had its own unique set of circumstances. I would say that effort to create the Canada Oil Sands Innovation Alliance was one of the most difficult things I'd ever done on a change level, and culturally, and also just in terms of creativity. The industry itself had never had collaboration of that sort as part of their business model, and it really was a voyage into the unknown. Like what can we do together, and is it better than what we could do individually?
Right.
And it actually took engagement of CEOs of those companies in order to get lift off of that. And just to give a little color to what it invented in a way, one of the features of the design was sharing intellectual property on environmental technologies. We had never shared technology, intellectual property. Like we've defended it always. That was always the paradigm. And all the lawyers for these firms protect that really in a big way. Like no one can infringe on your IP. That was the mantra. We had full-time legal staff dedicate, that was their lives, defend intellectual property because there's real value in it. And we said, no, what would happen if we shared? All these lawyers looked at us, said, you can't do that. And with these CEOs, I was one of the provocateurs supporting their conversation. We said, well, why not? And yeah, they're up around $2.5 billion of IP shared now, and it's all in the spirit of accelerating performance improvement. Like we reframed the mindset that defending IP wasn't creating value. What creates value is rapid deployment of new breakthroughs.
Right.
And if we share and every company builds on that breakthrough, the advancement you get to that is a far better business outcome than playing defense
Yeah.
on IP. And one company getting a breakthrough would always be replicated by another. It just
Right.
was a matter of time. So if you declare that you're just going to try and accelerate the time frame for that innovation, there's a really compelling business case. It wasn't altruism, but that it was very intense, the cultural element of it. And for companies to learn and individuals within those companies to learn how to work together in a very collaborative manner. That was a cultural shift. We had lots of companies who thought they were smarter than other ones, and people within those firms that thought they knew way more than others. So what
Yeah.
can we gain? What can we gain from sitting at a table with those other characters, you know? And they came to realize that no, they could actually do way more together. They had goals and they had to achieve them, and they could only do it by working together. So it was things like, how much water could we conserve? Like,
Right.
how little water could we use in the oil sands? And they were given some very aggressive reduction targets, and they had to go right into the technology, right into the process. They had to reimagine everything we do with water, and
Right.
everybody had to share. There were no free riders allowed. That COSIA was a really big game changing cultural and performance shift for them. And yeah, that kind of came from my whiteboard. Imagined what it could be, and I thought I'm probably well positioned to make it happen. Back to relationships, I had built up enough connections to those other firms and credibility within the sector that I was able to play a central role in it. If I hadn't done that groundwork of building relationships and gaining credibility and trust, I couldn't have done it. So a bit of a lesson there too for you young folks as you embark on your careers is that the relationships you build up in not just what you do, but how you do it are things that really help carry you forward. It's a networked world, right? It's like, nothing happens in isolation. No one person can heroically do all things. So really treat it as a strategic asset is how you work with others. How really matters. It's often not treated as deliberately or strategically as it should be. Yeah, if you work with others and you cause friction and havoc, or you're arrogant and you're not generous in how you're listening to others and curious about the world, there's no good will come of it. And which also is one other learning I'll share as part of this, a theme that's behind what you see in my career. It's been driven by curiosity.
Right.
Okay. Curiosity is a very powerful mindset. It affects how you listen to others. It does take you into those relationships that I talked about before. And if you have a mindset of curiosity, it just leads to a lot of right behaviors. It leads to continuous learning, and it just puts you on the right path of
Yeah.
personal growth and of impact. I've also seen arrogance, and that's the exact opposite of it, right?
Yeah.
Where you're the smartest person in the room, or you think you are, and what can I learn from anyone else? I study other CEOs. Believe me, I've run into both kinds, the intensely curious ones that just end up doing phenomenal things, and then the arrogant ones who end up limiting themselves,
Exactly.
right? If you're the CEO of a company and you don't think you can learn anything from the people that are working for you, you're going to not seek their advice. They're going to disengage, right? Like, it's no sense giving advice to that guy. He won't listen to it anyway. Where if you're a curious CEO, you want to know what the opinions are of everyone around you.
Yeah.
Boy, those folks, they got to know what they're doing. They know they're going to be asked, and they're going to own the decisions when they're made because they know they've had input to them.
Right.
So the theme of curiosity, or the mindset of curiosity, to me is a very powerful frame of reference. And, when you're in school, like you guys are, and when I was at Guelph, I mean, that's a world of curiosity, right? I mean, you're just soaking in and learning so much. You can take that into your business world. You can take that into your jobs. And when I was in any job, whether it was that Cold Lake job, the first one I had, I wanted to learn everything that I could about the community that I was operating in. Like, when people talk about how I got to know Indigenous culture and communities, it was like, yeah, I coached the women's softball team on the Cold Lake Reserve. And I used to interact with trappers, like guys that were out on the land
Yep.
harvesting uh, critters for fur and things. And I was curious what they were up to and how they did it and all of that. And same with environment groups. Like I got to know groups in my career from Greenpeace to, very pragmatic ones. And it wasn't that we always agreed. Like that was never going to happen either, but we would agree to disagree and we would understand one another's point of view. So even in cases of conflict, I always looked at it as a learning opportunity,
That's
right?
right.
And boy, now we're in a wildly polarized world. I don't pretend to understand quite how it's wired these days, but I do know that listening and curiosity are going to be the right answers to it.
Right, for sure. And then, yeah, so I know you've kind of touched on this a bit, but with so many successes that you get from your career, there's always going to be some obstacles that you kind of have to pass. What would you say kind of your biggest obstacles are that you've had to overcome, and kind of how have you dealt with them?
Yeah, it's hard to be general about it. Because a lot of what's driven my career is being part of driving change.
Yep.
So if you looked at another theme behind those things I've taken on over time, whether it was that climate leadership panel or going into the AER, I had to redesign the whole organization, or COSIA, create a new business model. Or in Suncor, I had to really engage heavily on safety,
Right.
back to foundational things. I saw it as being broken. I had executives who thought everything was just fine. There's going to be naysayers, okay? Like any change that you take on, there's always a group of people who are going to be very opposed
Yeah.
to it. And that's just generic to how the world works. And those folks, like I came to understand that I could not spend a huge amount of time trying to change their minds. So a lot of what I started to do was create coalitions of the willing among people that really either strongly supported it or who I knew could be convinced to
Right.
come along. And then that would overwhelm the naysayers. So a visual depiction of that would be, imagine a normal distribution curve for any type of change that you're taking on. You have one tail of that normal distribution curve that are champions and that are really passionate. You'll
Right.
have one part of the curve going up that are supportive. They
Hmm.
might not be wildly supportive, but they're supportive. You have that other curve coming down the other side of people that are neutral, don't really have an opinion. And then the other tail is vehemently opposed. And so I always carry visual imagery with me as I listen to people, as I do change work. Like when I listen to somebody and I'll talk to them about trying to do something different, if I see that they're aggressively opposed, I know immediately where they fit on the curve. Every meeting I'm in, I'm mapping out who's where, right? Like in the team of people that I'm working with or in the context of it. And I'm very deliberate and situationally aware of that dynamic, right? Which then means I can navigate through it.
For sure.
Yeah, safety was one of those in Suncor. Like I had executives who thought it wasn't a problem at all, but they were completely on top of it. And in my background and history within Imperial Oil, particularly, I had to become very expert on safety. And I looked at the same diagnostic and said, oh my God, if we don't intervene to get better on safety, there's going to be bad things happen, like people could get killed. Yeah, I had to go to the CEO and tell him safety's busted and you got to do something about it. And he had guys, executives working for him that knew I had told him that. They came and told me, Gord, you should never have gone to the CEO. You should never have declared that it's a problem. It undermines us and we're going to, they didn't say it out loud, but punish you for doing it. Right. And
Right.
that's threatening. Like it was almost
Yeah.
like a personal threat. But
That's right.
my response to them was the fact that you're talking to me like this reaffirms why what I did was the right thing to do. Like I had to speak truth to power, even though I put myself at personal risk. And because I looked at the playing field and I said, who else is going to tell that CEO what the hell's really going on here. The filtering was too great. And I would have more regrets not telling him than if I went in and told him. And if I got fired over it, that's a reflection on them, not me. Do the right things for the right reasons. So when my performance review came up every year, almost always amongst the VPs of Suncor, like imagine the situation, right? We have 14,000 employees. We got 40 vice presidents, and then we got like 10 executive vice presidents and a CEO. Well, those executive VPs, they would review all the VPs' performance.
Right.
Mine was wildly controversial. Like the CEO, the two of them that I worked with there, they would say to me, Gord, we did performance reviews, and oh my God, I protected you. Because they knew what I was doing, right? Like how I needed to work. And
Right.
if I wasn't controversial, I wasn't doing my job. And that was true whether it was safety or whether it was on climate. If you're working on the climate issue in the oil and gas sector, it's tough. You're reconciling some huge dilemmas, and you're trying to catalyze important debates and conversations, right, about energy transition and other things. That's never going to be easy. Over time, I developed alligator skin. Imagine, like, just to put some color on this, when I was appointed to the Alberta Climate Leadership Panel, it was the Notley government, which is an NDP government, got elected in Alberta, which is like, do you know anything about Alberta? That was like this wild political outcome, right? Like a left-leaning government of Alberta. And then Gord gets appointed to this climate leadership panel. Amongst the five of us, do you know how many were oil and gas related? One, me.
Right.
Do you know how the whole oil and gas sector, they're looking and saying, oh my God, Lambert's appointed to this thing, and I'm supposed to be representing their interests. Well, they know if I'm appointed to something, something's going to happen. Like I'm a change guy. I do not steer straight. And so an economy-wide carbon price was the outcome, right, of that panel. Like that was the forerunner to the carbon tax federally. That was really groundbreaking, like for Alberta to commit to an economy-wide carbon tax. But, I had to get my oil patch guys together to say, don't panic here. Like, this is actually the best policy outcome. And here's why. And they understand market forces. So we had CEOs that were on the stage when Premier Notley announced that plan. But
Right.
yeah, I was the oil and gas guy on that thing. It was like, don't sell the farm. He had to get the balance right.
For sure. Well, I have two more kind of main questions for you. Obviously, your career has spanned decades, and with kind of all the work you've done, so much of it still operates today. And I was wondering how you kind of see the future of the energy sector in Alberta developing, as well as like in kind of all of Canada and even globally.
Yeah, I tracked that quite deliberately. You asked me where my curiosity is nowadays. Energy transition is a central focus, which is why I do the World Economic Forum expert panel work. I just get data there. It's not like I'm orchestrating anything, but I get a window into what's happening. The energy transition, it's a force of gravity now. Like there's no stopping it.
Right.
Because the pace of technology advancement has been so great and the cost reductions have been so significant that it's competing on its own. So electrification of transportation, like vehicles, that's a relentless trend that's going to just happen,
Right.
right? These are great vehicles. I've had a Tesla that's wonderful to drive, but no politician can repeal that.
Right.
These Chinese EVs we're bringing in, like they're so much less expensive, but they're phenomenal vehicles. China is not going to ever do a mea culpa and go backwards on producing electric vehicles. So electrification is just like a relentless force. It's not if, it's just how fast. And so that to me is a positive, actually. And for oil and gas firms, they better diversify how they treat their businesses, right? Like you can see that as a threat or you can see it as an opportunity. And I was involved in making the business case for Petro-Canada back in the day to put electric charging stations on its service stations. You want to talk about an, oh my God, I got a hard time over that one. Like, why the hell would we ever put electric charging stations on our service stations? That's a threat to our business. No, it's like you want people to come to your spot, your service station location, right? They're going to charge up and they're going to buy a coffee, and you make more money on the confections and the things in the service station than you do even on the fuel. And so they decided to do a pilot of it. And sure enough, like now they have it pretty much standard, right? It's like a multi-purpose station, which attracts people to come and do business with you. And it's a little thing, but I mean, at the time it was very pioneering. So energy transition to me is a positive sign. I don't use politics as a metric. You don't repeal the reality of climate change. No politician does. And no politician repeals market forces.
Right.
They can change some pace here and there, but they don't change the real forces of gravity of that either. So yeah, don't use politics as a metric. It's like noise. Look deeper. It's unsettling in the realities of how hard it is to change from a legacy energy history to a new one. It's harder than what we imagined. Like, electrification's happening, but for things like airplanes, you can have biofuel added as a segment of that, but oil and gas have energy density that's hard to replicate. What I would do as someone working in the sector is I realized there were some things I could change, some things I could not. Architect friend of mine, or person I've gotten to appreciate a lot, is Bruce Mao, a pioneer in design thinking. But he said, architects, we don't beat ourselves up over bad buildings that we built in the past. Like, we look at them now and we might have regrets over it because the context has changed, but you focus your efforts on what the better building is. So it's like, don't beat yourself up over where we've come from. That's old history. That was choices that were made by others at a other point in time. I mean, when oil and gas got chosen as the fuel that we built our economies and societies on, climate wasn't on the radar. The world got forward and we have a different context. Now we have to redesign for the future and for the new context that we're operating in, which is a climate and carbon constrained future. Direct that energy towards creativity, innovation on the new thing, not beat ourselves up over the old.
Absolutely. Last final question. You kind of touched on this already, kind of through previous questions, but do you have any kind of other advice that you would give to someone entering your profession, or any advice to yourself at 22 years old when you were graduating and kind of starting?
Yeah. I mean, when I think of my university background, I didn't literally use a bunch of the stuff that I ended up learning. Yeah, to be blunt, it's gained a ton of knowledge.
Yep.
But what I really gained was the confidence in my ability to learn. And so when you're right in the middle of writing exams and trying to pass your courses and get through just the grunt work of school, you're not really appreciating that learning how to learn is a big part of the value proposition. And so you don't treat your degree as like a limitation, because the way the world works doesn't honor like disciplinary boundaries or otherwise, right? It's just that there aren't any boundaries anymore. Right. So learning how to learning how to interact with others to get things done, all those soft skills, let's call them, are what really carry you forward. My marine biology background, by the way, like every time I have a vacation or have a chance to get close to an ocean somewhere, my head's underwater. I have a deep passion always for everything marine. That's why I went into that field. But making a living at it back in the day was not really easy either. I've been able to express my passion for my field of practice in other ways. And then what I also carry with me from that is I have a real appreciation for natural systems that I was able to draw on in so many ways, like how ecosystems respond to change. That insights around that are part of how I thought about the change expertise I had to develop. And, engineers that I worked with, they would say to me, Gord, you have a tolerance for ambiguity that we don't have. Like they would look at the world in a very black and white way because the bridge you're building can't fall down. My approach was very different. It was like very experimental in almost all the changes I did. It was like, I'm going to try this out and then adapt as I went along. And I'm also going to accept that I don't have all the answers and that the changes that I was doing were not going to turn out exactly the way I imagined they would. And also in the way the world works, like I'm not arrogant enough to imagine the world's black and white. I mean, it's just a ton of gray. So I think just having engaged in a study of the natural sciences gave me a tolerance for ambiguity and for a systems view of things that was different than a lot of my colleagues had in a heavily engineering oriented background. But, I think in some cases you'll find the academic experience translates for you in different ways you don't always anticipate.
And that's the type of mindset that gets you to like the very top, right? Like being interim CEO and stuff like that. You just kind of learn along the way. You don't necessarily have to just do the same thing over and over. If you're curious, you continue learning and you make your way up.
Yeah. When I hired young people into my Suncor world, they might have a geography background or an environmental background. I would say, we're going to give you a job, okay? Because there was real work that we had to get done, and they had to roll up the sleeves and do it. Somebody had to do it, okay? But I would say to them, you're in a company right now that is wildly complex, and it's a huge playing field, okay? Everything from how a barrel of oil gets produced to how it moves to how it gets refined and how it gets marketed and everything in between. There's no stopping you from learning about any part of that business, even though your job has nothing to do with it, right? Like you can be intensely curious about what the Suncor business model is and how the thing works and all the pieces of it and how they fit and how the profitability of the company works, even in the context of that job that you're sitting in. Because you can just punch the clock, go in and do your job every day, and hey, I got this product done, I got this report delivered. If you really want to realize your full potential and impact, make sure you're spending some time talking to other people in the company. Anytime you have a chance to interact with someone in another business, part of the business, find out more about their world. And then that takes you on a outward trajectory, not an inward one. I did that within the company, had that approach of wanting to learn everything I could about the business, but also outside the company with the stakeholders and others. It's like, gee, I'm really curious how environment groups think and how they see the world and what their points of view are. I once convinced the CEO of Suncor to have Greenpeace set up a booth in our AGM. Now, that was mind blowing. Oh, and you know who the individual was that I worked that out with Greenpeace? Stephen Guilbeault, who became our environment minister federally. He and I worked this out where they set up a booth in our AGM. I said, don't hang yourself some rafters and do wild and crazy stunts. Tell people in our AGM what you're doing, what you think of things and what the climate issue is about, and educate them. And damned if they didn't do it, and they behaved. And so in the way the world works, when I got appointed to the board of the Canadian Climate Institute, one of the first events I went to was a reception in Ottawa. Guess who was there? Stephen Guilbeault. Somebody said, oh, Minister, have you ever met Gord Lambert? My God, have we met? I mean, it was just like we hugged one another and had a great chuckle over it. And like you couldn't have imagined that, like in the way the world works. But yeah, that comes from that whole mindset of be curious, be connecting with others.
And that'll help you make your way up.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that. I appreciate that a
We
lot.
appreciate all the insight.
Yeah.
Well,
Awesome.
Wisdom is hard earned, but it's only wisdom if you share it. I could be the smartest guy on the planet, but if I just talk to myself. So it's actually a big highlight for me to share, learning by sharing in this way. And anytime I'm asked, I just love doing it.
Well, thank you so much.